DevOps interviews are becoming more competitive than ever, with over 60% of tech companies increasing their demand for DevOps skills in 2024 alone. The job market has become highly competitive. Hence, securing a position requires not just talent, but strategic preparation. Welcome everyone to the second episode in our series dedicated to DevOps interviews. In the first episode, we discussed key strategies to help you land a DevOps or related role in 2024. And in today's video, we'll break down 30 specific interview questions and answers based on a sample DevOps job description. These questions will range from Linux to containerization to CI/CD, infrastructure as code, and a lot more. So make sure to watch this video to the end to be fully prepared for your upcoming interviews. As I mentioned, we'll use this job description to guide our discussion, ensuring you can answer similar questions in your interviews confidently. So, let's get started. As we covered in the first video in this series, a typical DevOps interview process usually begins with a call from the recruiter who assesses your general fit for the role. Next, you might meet with the hiring manager who dives deeper into your technical skills and experience. Following that call is often a technical deep dive where your problem-solving abilities and technical knowledge are put to the test. If successful, you move on to a culture fit interview to ensure your values align with the company's. Throughout these stages, you'll face a series of technical questions designed to assess your capabilities. And today, using the job description displayed on your screen, we'll explore potential questions you might encounter. First, let's start with a very common question. Tell me about yourself. This is a very typical question which you'll most likely get across all stages of the interview process, so you have to always be prepared for it. Preparing a strong response to the tell me about yourself question is crucial, as it usually sets the tone for the interview. You should aim to answer this question in 2 to 3 minutes, and your answer should concisely summarize your professional journey. Make sure to emphasize your skills and achievements and also align your experience with the specific requirements of the DevOps engineer role. So let's say you have 4 years of professional experience as a DevOps engineer. A very good answer to the tell me about yourself question would be, over the past 4 years, I specialized in DevOps, particularly in automating and optimizing CI/CD pipelines and cloud infrastructure with a focus on AWS. So let's say in the past you worked for a company called Tech Solutions. So you say, at Tech Solutions, where I had my first significant role, I improved our continuous integration practices, which sped up deployment cycles by 40%. I also led major projects to migrate our systems to a cloud-based infrastructure using Docker and Kubernetes. And this not only enhanced our scalability, but also cut down costs significantly. So let's say now you work for a company called Digital Innovate. You also want to explain what you've done at Digital Innovate. Something like, I've implemented Prometheus and Grafana to proactively monitor our systems, reducing downtime by 30%. I also manage 5 Kubernetes clusters running on AWS Elastic Kubernetes Service, and it is my duty to make sure that our workloads run efficiently and securely. And usually, you'll want to end the tell me about yourself question by touching on the role you're applying for. So let's say the company is Deploy Chuckles, right? So you say, this role at Deploy Chuckles excites me because it offers the opportunity to leverage my skills in AWS and CI/CD processes at a much larger scale and in a more challenging environment. I'm particularly drawn to your company's innovative approach to cloud solutions, and I'm eager to contribute to your projects that focus on scalable cloud infrastructure. This answer is obviously for someone with some years of experience, but let's say you're a beginner, you want to start by saying, thank you for this opportunity. I recently graduated with a degree in computer science where I focused on software development and systems management. During my studies, I became particularly interested in DevOps, and I had the chance to work on a university project that involved setting up basic CI/CD pipelines using Jenkins. This project allowed me to understand the fundamentals of automated testing and continuous integration. Although I'm at the beginning of my professional journey, I'm very eager to apply my foundational knowledge in a practical, real-world setting. I'm particularly excited about this role because it offers the chance to work hands-on with advanced DevOps tools and technologies. I'm ready to learn quickly and contribute to your team's success, especially in areas that leverage cloud infrastructure, and automation, as these really interest me. An interviewer will most likely have some feedback after each question that you answer. So they could say, oh, that's really interesting. Can you talk about the most challenging project you've worked on? To answer this question, I always advise that candidates follow the STAR approach. The STAR approach is a structured method for responding to competency-based interview questions by discussing the specific situation, which is for the S, the task, which is for the T, and A for action, and the R for the result. This method helps candidates to tell a compelling story about their experiences in a clear and concise manner. So for an experienced candidate, your situation could be, at Tech Solutions, during an early phase of cloud adoption, we faced significant issues with our legacy systems which were not optimized for the cloud environment, and this led to performance bottlenecks and increased costs. Then for the task, you could say, I was tasked with leading a project to migrate these systems to a scalable cloud-based infrastructure that will not only resolve these issues but also enhance system reliability and reduce operating costs. Next, you want to talk about the action you took, which will be more like, I initiated the project by conducting a thorough analysis of our existing infrastructure and identifying key components that could benefit from cloud scalability and automation. You could also say I collaborated with 3 other teammates and we implemented a series of migration to AWS utilizing services like Amazon EC2, RDS, and S3. Along with Docker containers for application deployments and Kubernetes for container orchestration. I developed the CI/CD pipelines using Jenkins that integrated with our new cloud setup, ensuring smooth, automated transitions during the deployment phases. Then you want to close it out with a result like this. The project was a success, resulting in a 50% reduction in downtime and a 30% cut in operational costs. Our deployment cycles sped up by over 40%, significantly increasing our team's productivity and the overall performance of our applications. The project not only demonstrated my ability to lead and execute complex migrations effectively, but also sharpened my skills in optimizing and managing cloud-based environments. If you're a beginner, you still want to give an answer within your current capacity, as we've all worked on challenging projects one way or the other. So as a beginner, you also want to follow the STAR approach, right? So you could say, during my final semester at the university, I was part of a team project where we were challenged to develop a multi-tier web application that was to be deployed in a cloud environment, which was a new territory for most of my teammates, including myself. That's the situation. So you want to proceed to the task by saying something like, our task was to ensure that the application was not only functional, but also secure and scalable, which required learning and implementing new technologies under really tight deadlines. Next is the action you took, which could be, despite being new to cloud technologies, I took the initiative to research and propose the use of AWS for our project. And due to this, I led the effort to use AWS Elastic Beanstalk for our application deployment, which involved learning the service from scratch and educating my team members. I also implemented basic monitoring with AWS CloudWatch to track our application's performance and set up alerts for potential downtime. Then you want to move on to the results, which could be, our project was successfully deployed and was one of the top rated projects in my class. It handled simulated traffic efficiently and maintained good performance throughout our testing phase. This experience was really instrumental for me. It not only boosted my confidence in handling real-world software projects, but also piqued my interest in cloud technologies and DevOps practices. By the way, one thing you want to pay attention to in interviews is personalizing your work. Of course, it's okay to mention that you've worked in teams, but interviewers really care about what you did. What role did you play? So get used to saying, I did this, I did that, and so on and so forth. Personalize your work. Make sense? Alright, cool. Now let's get into some more practical questions, and we'll be beginning with Linux-based questions. So the interviewer could ask you to talk about your experience with managing Linux servers. If you do have experience with Linux, then you want to express that clearly and convincingly. So something like this. I've been managing Linux servers for 4 years, focusing on optimizing and securing high traffic environments. At my current job, I oversee 25 Linux servers that support both development and production environments. My responsibilities include routine maintenance, security patches, and performance monitoring using tools like Nagios. I recently led a project to optimize Apache configurations, resulting in a 30% improvement in response times during peak traffic. I also manage server security, setting up firewalls, and SSH access controls to safeguard against vulnerabilities. Additionally, I use bash scripts to automate deployments, and this has greatly enhanced our teams efficiently. If you're a beginner, first, be as honest as possible with your experience, as it's easier to get stuck when you don't really have an in-depth knowledge of the particular technology. So you could give an answer like, currently, I do not have extensive hands-on experience managing Linux servers in a professional setting, but I possess a foundational understanding of Linux from my studies and personal learning initiatives. I recognize the critical role that Linux plays in managing modern cloud infrastructures and its foundational impact on technologies like Docker and Kubernetes. For instance, Linux C groups are pivotal for resource allocation, essential for Docker containers, and knowledge of Linux commands is crucial for troubleshooting Kubernetes pods directly via container shells. My eagerness to learn and adapt is strong, and I'm committed to rapidly scaling my practical skills in Linux to effectively contribute to your team objectives if given the opportunity. Again, if you're new to DevOps and you've not worked with Linux, I highly recommend starting with basic Linux administration courses and gradually progressing to more advanced topics such as shell scripting and system security. Platforms like Linux Foundation or free resources available online can be very helpful. Linux is non-negotiable in the world of DevOps, and a strong grasp of it will significantly enhance your ability to succeed in this field. Also, as I've mentioned in a number of my videos, as a fresher, you want to work on projects, get certified to cover up for the experience you've not had the opportunity to gather, and make sure to follow the tips I shared in the first video of this series. So if you've not had the chance to watch it, I strongly advise you to do so. Moving on, but still on Linux, the interviewer might want to assess your comfort level with basic Linux commands, and they could ask, how do you create and manage user accounts on a Linux system? You could answer by saying, to create a user account in Linux, you use the user add command followed by the username. For example, sudo user add the DevOps dude will create a user named the DevOps dude. To set or change the user's password, you use the passwd command like sudo passwd the DevOps dude. You also want to mention that managing user accounts also involves setting appropriate permissions and adding the user to necessary groups, which can be done with user mode. For instance, sudo user mode -ag sudo the DevOps dude adds the DevOps dude to the sudo group, granting administrative privileges. The interviewer might also want to gauge your ability to monitor and control system processes. They could ask you, how do you monitor active processes and manage them on a Linux system? A good answer would be, to monitor active processes in Linux, the top command is commonly used. This command provides a dynamic real-time view of running processes. You can see CPU and memory usage per process, which is crucial for performance monitoring. To manage processes, you can use commands like kill to terminate a process. For example, if a process has a process ID of 1234, running kill 1234 on your command line will attempt to terminate the process. For unresponsive processes, kill -9 1234 sends a seek kill signal, forcefully stopping it. Moving on, to determine your understanding of network security and management on Linux, an interviewer might ask you about monitoring open ports. They could phrase it like this: how do you check which ports are open on your server? Here's a great answer. To check open ports on a Linux server, you could use the netstart command, which provides information about network connections and open ports. For example, running sudo netstart -tuln lists all active connections and listening ports along with their protocol and status. This is crucial for ensuring that only necessary ports are open, enhancing the server's security posture. Now that we've covered some questions on Linux, let's move on to some networking and DNS related questions. In networking, understanding the protocols essential for data transmission is highly crucial. An interviewer might assess your foundational networking knowledge by asking, can you explain the difference between TCP, which is Transmission Control Protocol, and UDP, which is User Datagram Protocol? There are specific things an interviewer wants to hear when they ask this question. So you can answer by saying, TCP and UDP are both transport layer protocols used for sending data over the internet, but they differ significantly in how they manage the transmission of data. TCP is connection oriented, meaning it requires a handshake process to establish a connection before any data can be sent. This handshake process involves 3 steps. First is the SYN or synchronize step, where the client sends a SYN packet to the server to initiate a connection. Next is the SYN-ACK step or synchronize acknowledge step, where the server responds with a SYN-ACK packet to acknowledge the connection request. And the final step is the ACK step, which is the acknowledge step, where the client sends an ACK packet back to the server and the connection is established. You also want to mention that this process ensures that a reliable connection is made before data transfer begins, which is why TCP is preferred for applications where data integrity is crucial, such as web browsing and email. UDP or User Datagram Protocol, on the other hand, is connectionless. There is no handshake process and the data is sent directly without establishing a connection, making it faster but less reliable. UDP does not guarantee delivery, order, or error checking, making it suitable for applications where speed is more critical than reliability, such as video streaming or online gaming. DNS records are vital for managing a domain's services and directing traffic appropriately. So the interviewer might want to explore your understanding of DNS configurations by asking, can you list some examples of DNS record types and explain what they are used for? So you want to answer the question like this. There are quite a number of DNS record types, but I'll mention a few. So first we have the address records, also known as A records, and they link up a domain to the physical IP address of a computer hosting that domain's services. For example, an A record translates a domain like www.example.com to an IP like 192.0.2.1. We also have CNAME records, which are used to alias one name to another. For example, if you have a mobile website at m.example.com as a CNAME to www.example.com, it means m.example.com is an alias for www.example.com. Another popular record type is the MX record, also known as mail exchange records, which directs emails to a mail server configured to accept emails on behalf of the domain. Just so you know, we're still on networking questions. Given the rise of remote work, ensuring secure connections is paramount, and interviewers might ask about your capability to set up secure networks. For example, how do you implement a secure VPN connection for a remote team? You want to give an answer like this. To implement a secure VPN connection, I will first choose a reliable VPN protocol like OpenVPN, which supports robust encryption standards. I would set up an OpenVPN server on a machine that is highly available and secure. Each team member will install the VPN client software on their devices. I'll generate certificates for both the server and each client to ensure encrypted communications. After configuring the server with the appropriate routing and firewall rules to permit only authorized access, I'll distribute the client's configurations securely. You also want to mention that regular audits and updates will be scheduled to maintain security standards and adapt to any new threats. The interviewer might want to evaluate your problem-solving skills by asking, what steps would you take to troubleshoot a DNS resolution problem? This question is very important, and make sure to understand how to troubleshoot DNS issues as they happen more often than you think. So, you can answer by saying, to troubleshoot a DNS resolution problem, I'll start by using the nslookup or dig commands to test the DNS responses from the configured DNS server. If these tools indicate that the DNS server is not responding, I'll check the network connectivity to the DNS server. If the server is reachable but not resolving names correctly, I'll verify DNS server configuration files for any errors. Additionally, I'll check the TTL or time to leave values of the DNS records to ensure they're not cached beyond their expiration. If external DNS is at fault, I might temporarily switch to a public DNS service like Google's 8.8.8.8 for further testing. Throughout this process, I'll also check system logs for any security events or configuration changes that might affect DNS operations. Next, let's tackle some AWS related questions, which are crucial as stated in the job description. In an AWS environment, maintaining uptime and system resilience is highly critical. So an interviewer might assess your ability to architect robust systems by asking, how do you ensure high availability and fault tolerance in your AWS deployments? You want to give an answer that shows that you're familiar with AWS services and features that support high availability. For example, you could say, to ensure high availability and fault tolerance in AWS, I would typically use a combination of AWS services and architectural best practices. For instance, I deploy applications across multiple availability zones within a region to ensure that if one availability zone fails, the application can still operate from another one. I utilize AWS Elastic Load Balancing to distribute incoming traffic across healthy Amazon EC2 instances in order to prevent any single point of failure. Additionally, I implement Amazon RDS multi-AZ or multi-availability zone deployments for databases in order to handle failover automatically to a standby instance in case of an outage. For stateless applications, I use autoscaling to adjust the number of instances dynamically based on traffic, ensuring performance remains consistent without manual intervention. Cost management is a crucial aspect of cloud computing, especially in this current climate. So to understand how you approach this, an interviewer might ask, what strategies would you use for monitoring and optimizing costs on AWS? So you want to give an answer like this. To monitor and optimize AWS costs, I start by utilizing AWS Cost Explorer to analyze and visualize spending patterns over time. This tool helps to identify trends, pinpoint cost drivers, and detect anomalies. I implement tagging strategies to allocate costs accurately across different departments or projects, ensuring transparency and accountability. For optimization, I use AWS Trusted Advisor to get recommendations on where I could reduce costs, such as identifying underutilized EC2 instances that can be downsized or terminated. I also take advantage of reserved instances and savings plans for workloads with predictable usage patterns, which can significantly reduce our costs compared to on-demand pricing. Moving on, security is paramount in cloud environments, and an interviewer might try to gauge how well you follow security practices by asking, describe how you secure applications and data on AWS. You want to start by saying, in AWS, I adopt a layered security approach to protect both applications and data. I start by securing the network layer using Amazon Virtual Private Cloud or Amazon VPC, setting up security groups and network access control lists or ACLs to control inbound and outbound traffic to EC2 instances and other AWS resources. I use AWS IAM policies to enforce least privilege access controls to AWS services. For data security, I ensure that all data stored in Amazon S3 buckets are encrypted at rest using AWS Key Management Service or AWS KMS. I also enforce encryption in transit using TLS across all services. Additionally, I regularly audit configurations with AWS Config and monitor real-time security events using Amazon Guard Duty to quickly respond to potential security threats. Now let's move on to CI/CD. CI/CD is a key DevOps practice, and you most likely will be faced with questions on this topic. An interviewer might start by understanding the tools you're familiar with. They could ask, what CI/CD tools have you used? Can you walk us through them? So you want to give an answer like this. In my experience, I've primarily used Jenkins and GitLab CI for CI/CD. Jenkins offers extensive plugin support, which allows me to customize pipelines according to specific project needs. For projects hosted on GitLab, I leverage GitLab CI due to its seamless integration with the repository, enabling a straightforward setup of pipelines that automatically trigger builds, tests, and deployments based on commits or merge requests. Interviewers often look for problem-solving skills, so they might ask you to talk about a specific challenge you faced with CI/CD and how you went on to solve it. A good answer would be, a significant challenge I faced with CI/CD was dealing with flaky tests that would pass locally but fail in the pipeline, and this was causing delays and confusion across the team. To resolve this, I implemented a more robust test environment that closely mirrored our production setup. I also introduced parallel execution of tests to reduce wait times, and I added retry mechanisms for tests that were prone to intermittent failure due to external dependencies. If you remember, earlier in this video we talked about the STAR approach. So you want to mention the results that the changes you made had. Something like, these changes improved the reliability of our deployment process and reduced the manual intervention required to manage test failures. Next, the interviewer might ask how you integrate security measures in your CI/CD pipelines to ensure that you can maintain secure development practices. To answer this question, you could say, in order to ensure security within CI/CD pipelines, I incorporate several practices. First, I use secret management tools like HashiCorp Vault to handle API keys, credentials, and other sensitive data, ensuring they're not exposed in the code base. I integrate security scanning tools such as SonarQube for static analysis and Snyk for dependency checks directly into the pipeline. This ensures that every piece of code is scanned before it's deployed. Additionally, I enforce the principle of least privilege by setting granular access controls on both the pipeline and deployment environments. As I mentioned earlier, CI/CD is a crucial aspect of DevOps, and you really want to familiarize yourself with the tools that help drive this practice. Now let's move on to infrastructure as code using Terraform. Virtually every organization leverages some sort of infrastructure as code tool when creating resources on the cloud. There are many benefits of infrastructure as code, including reduced human error, improved deployment consistency, and a lot more. So be prepared to answer questions related to this topic in your interview. That being said, to ensure you understand Terraform's core mechanisms, an interviewer might ask you, can you talk about Terraform state management and what you know about Terraform state lock? You want to answer by saying something like, Terraform state is a file that Terraform uses to track the state of all resources it manages. It records metadata about what infrastructure was created, the dependency tree, and the configuration used for those resources. Terraform state allows Terraform to map real-world resources to your configuration, to keep track of metadata, and improve performance for large infrastructures. On the other hand, a Terraform state lock is used to prevent others, for example, your teammates, from making conflicting changes when a Terraform operation is being executed. This locking mechanism ensures that the state file is only being modified by one operation at a time, thus avoiding potential conflicts and inconsistencies that could arise from concurrent operations. Now, given Terraform's powerful automation capabilities, safeguarding against accidental deletions is highly crucial. Your interviewer might ask you, how do you prevent unintentional resource destruction in Terraform? To answer this, you can say, to protect resources from being accidentally destroyed, you can add a lifecycle block and set the prevent_destroy flag to true within the resource configuration in Terraform. When this attribute is set, Terraform will refuse to destroy the resource even if an attempt is made to delete it via Terraform plan or Terraform apply. This adds an extra layer of safety which ensures that critical resources aren't accidentally removed from the infrastructure. To gauge your experience with structuring Terraform configurations, your interviewer might inquire about your use of Terraform modules by asking you to explain what Terraform modules are and what the advantages are. If you've not worked with Terraform modules and don't understand how they are used, please look into this. But you could answer by saying, Terraform modules help to encapsulate Terraform configurations so that they can be reused and shared. Terraform modules help to keep Terraform code dry, and by dry I mean don't repeat yourself. The modules also help to manage source code effectively, and they allow you to break down complex systems into manageable components. For example, you might have a Terraform module for setting up an AWS virtual private cloud with all the necessary networking resources, which can then be reused in multiple environments or shared within the community in the Terraform registry. Managing dependencies is a critical aspect of using Terraform effectively, and an interviewer might ask, how do you ensure modules interact correctly? A really good answer would be, in Terraform, dependencies between modules are managed by passing outputs from one module to another module as an input. For instance, if one module creates a VPC and another deploys instances, the VPC ID and the subnet IDs generated by the VPC module will be outputs that serve as necessary inputs for the instance module. This ensures that the instances module does not run until the VPC module has completed. Now that we've covered some questions on Terraform, let's look into some Docker related questions. If you've been following this channel, you already know I've got a comprehensive Docker playlist that contains all you need to master Docker. Give it a watch and I hope you find it helpful. Docker has become a key technology in DevOps for its ability to containerize applications. So an interviewer might ask you to describe Docker and explain its significance. You want to answer by saying, Docker is a platform that allows developers to package applications and their dependencies into containers. And a container is a lightweight, standalone executable package that includes everything needed to run a piece of software, including the code, the runtime libraries, and other dependencies. This ensures that the application will run consistently across any environment. Docker is crucial in DevOps because it simplifies configuration management, accelerates the development lifecycle, and supports CI/CD practices by providing a consistent environment from development to production. Docker helps to eliminate the "it works on my machine" problem, enhancing collaboration and efficiency. Next, the interviewer might ask, how do you handle persistent data in containers? A really good answer would be, to manage data within Docker containers, I use Docker volumes. They are completely managed by Docker and are decoupled from the lifecycle of the container, meaning data persists even when the container is deleted. And to set them up, one has to define Docker volumes in the Docker file or via the Docker run command. And this helps to ensure data persistence across container restarts and container updates. The interviewer might also be curious about strategies you adopt for minimizing Docker image sizes. So you could say, to reduce the size of Docker images, I follow several best practices. First, I choose the smallest base image that meets the application's requirements, such as an Alpine Linux image, which is minimalistic yet fully functional. Second, I leverage multi-state builds in Docker files, and this allows me to use one image for building the application and a smaller, cleaner image to run it. In the build stage, I install all necessary build tools and dependencies, compile the application, then copy only the executable and its runtime dependencies to the final image. I also have a video that covers all you need to know about Docker multi-state builds, so watch it to learn more. Additionally, you can mention removing unnecessary files such as cache, temporary files, and build dependencies, and also combining layers where appropriate to reduce overhead. Finally, regularly scanning images during development with tools like Docker Slim helps to analyze and recommend further optimizations. After addressing some questions around Docker, your interviewer might move into Kubernetes. So let's look into some Kubernetes related questions. As mentioned in my video covering an introduction to Kubernetes, Kubernetes is a key tool in the world of container orchestration. So the interviewer might start by asking you, what is Kubernetes and what is its impact on container management? You can answer by saying, Kubernetes is an open source container orchestration platform that automates the deployment, scaling, and management of containerized applications. It groups containers that make up an application into logical units for easy management and discovery. Kubernetes enhances container management by providing features to deploy networks, to provide service discovery, to scale applications up or down, maintain load balancing, check health of applications, and manage resource allocation based on user-defined configurations. Kubernetes is highly efficient in maintaining the desired state of the deployed applications, and it automatically replaces or recreates containers that fail, containers that get deleted, or get terminated. This not only ensures high availability, but also provides load balancing services to distribute network traffic and to ensure consistent application performance. If you mention autoscaling in your answer, your interviewer will most likely want to understand your capability to manage resource efficiency by asking you to describe how you will set up autoscaling in Kubernetes. And a really good answer would be, to set up autoscaling in Kubernetes, I'll use the horizontal pod autoscaler, also known as HPA. This resource automatically scales the number of pods in a deployment or replica set based on observed CPU utilization or other selected metrics. So firstly, you want to mention that you define the deployment and ensure metric collections through metric server deployed in the cluster. Then you also want to mention, I'll create a HPA or horizontal pod autoscaler resource specifying the minimum and maximum number of pods allowed and the CPU utilization threshold that triggers the scaling. The HPA or horizontal pod autoscaler adjusts the number of pods dynamically based on the rules defined, ensuring the applications meet performance standards without overutilizing resources. Troubleshooting is a critical skill in Kubernetes operations, and an interviewer might want to know your approach to diagnosing and resolving issues with failing pods in order to evaluate your problem-solving abilities. So the interviewer could ask you a question like, could you talk about an instance where you had to troubleshoot and fix a failing pod? You could give an answer like this. In one instance, I encountered a situation where a pod was continuously crashing after deployment. So to troubleshoot, I first checked the pod logs using the kubectl logs commands, which indicated a configuration error. I then used kubectl describe pod, passing in the pod name to get more details about the pod states and events. The event log showed that the pod was unable to mount a required persistent volume. Investigating further, I realized that the persistent volume claim was pointing to a non-existent storage class. After correcting the persistent volume claim to reference the correct storage class and ensuring the underlying storage resources were available, the pod was able to start successfully. This approach not only fixed immediate issues, but also improved our deployment script to prevent similar errors in the future. Managing sensitive data securely is essential in any deployment, and an interviewer might ask, what are some strategies you use in handling secrets in Kubernetes? Security is very crucial in DevOps, and you have to always be security oriented. So for this question, you could say, in Kubernetes, secrets are used to store and manage sensitive information such as passwords, OAuth tokens, and SSH keys. And in order to manage secrets securely, I typically store them in Kubernetes secret objects, which can be mounted as data volumes or exposed as environment variables to be used by the containers in a pod. I also ensure that access to secrets is tightly controlled through Kubernetes RBAC or role-based access control, where only specific roles that require access to those secrets can retrieve them. Additionally, for enhanced security, I integrate Kubernetes with external secret management systems like HashiCorp Vault, providing an extra layer of encryption and auditing capabilities. Next, let's look into some questions around monitoring and logging. Monitoring in cloud environments is crucial for maintaining performance and reliability. And an interviewer might ask, how do you ensure that infrastructure and applications are monitored effectively? You could answer by saying, in cloud environments, I implement a comprehensive monitoring strategy using tools such as Amazon CloudWatch or Prometheus, depending on the infrastructure. For instance, with Amazon CloudWatch, I've set up metrics to monitor CPU utilization, disk I/O, and network traffic of EC2 instances. I've also created alarms in CloudWatch to notify teams via SMS or emails if metrics exceed predefined thresholds, indicating potential performance or system health issues. Additionally, I use Prometheus for more granular monitoring, setting up custom metrics that are relevant to our application specific needs and using Grafana for detailed visualization. This approach not only helps in maintaining optimal performance, but also ensures high reliability and availability of our applications. Effective alerting is key to proactive incident management, and an interviewer might ask you about your methods for setting up alerts based on performance metrics in order to gauge your ability to maintain system stability. You want to give an answer like this. To configure alerts effectively, I use a tool like Prometheus for metric collection and alert manager for handling alerts. I first determine critical performance thresholds based on historical data and application requirements, such as response times, error rates, and resource utilization. For instance, I might set an alert if CPU utilization exceeds 80% for more than 5 minutes, which indicates a potential overload. Using Prometheus, I write query rules that trigger these alerts when the conditions are met. These alerts are then managed by Alert Manager, which is configured to route notifications to the appropriate channels such as Slack, email, or an on-call management platform like PagerDuty. This setup ensures that the entire team receives timely notifications for actionable issues, potentially preventing downtimes. We've thoroughly explored questions you could be faced with in an interview for a DevOps engineer role. And now the interviewer will most likely leave some time towards the end of the interview for you to ask questions. Having questions ready for the interviewer is an excellent strategy to not only show your interest in the role and company, but also to gather valuable insights that are not available in the job description or during the normal course of the interview. So I've put together some questions you should ask at the end of the interview. So first, you want to ask about the current challenges that the team is facing and how someone in the role can help solve them. This question is really important as it shows that you're forward thinking and you're mentally preparing yourself for the role. If the call is with a hiring manager or your potential manager, you could ask, how would you evaluate success for this position? This question is also really good because the hiring manager, who is potentially your manager, has a lot of insight into what they expect from you if selected for the position, and they're in the best position to give you the most accurate answer to this question. You also want to ask about the growth and learning opportunities for DevOps engineers within the organization. This is also a really good question as it shows that you're dedicated to self-development and you have a growth mindset. I'll reemphasize this. Make sure you have some questions prepared for your interviewer. Before we wrap up this video, it's important to remember that even though we've explored a range of interview questions and answers tailored to DevOps roles, can't cover every possible topic that you might encounter in an interview. Therefore, I recommend using the job description as your guide, as it serves as an excellent cheat sheet to help you prepare for questions related to the specific technologies mentioned. Today, we've delved into a variety of detailed scenario-based questions that are aligned with a realistic job description. I put together these questions and answers to equip you with the insights needed to showcase your extensive knowledge, your problem-solving abilities, and ultimately ace your DevOps interviews. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your feedback or any questions you might have in the comments below. I wish you all the best in your upcoming interviews, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.